to the slideshow.
Hello, I'm Doug Elrod. I'll be the instructor for this course in Anatomy and Physiology 1. You can see me here. I'm the male, and you can see my lovely wife with me in the picture. That's also Dr. Elrod. We both teach anatomy and physiology here in the Denton area. She is at TWU, and I teach at NCTC, as you know. So if you hear anything bad about Dr. Elrod, it's probably about her, not about me. Just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Arkansas. Did my undergraduate degree in Arkansas, got my master's degree in Memphis, and that's where I married my wife, and we came to Denton to get our PhDs, and got our PhDs at University of North Texas, and we loved Denton, and we just stayed and got jobs here in the area, and really, still really love Denton. I do have a stepson. He is 35 now, and he lives in Seattle, Washington. He's a photojournalist there. So I look forward to getting to know you during the semester, and please feel free to contact me whenever you need to. You see the email address there on the slide, dalrod@nctc.edu. I check my phone frequently. I check my computer frequently. I'm going to be on the computer a lot, so if you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to contact me. That's what I'm here for, okay? Okay, well, let's take a look at some anatomy and physiology. So, anatomy is the oldest of our scientific disciplines of medicine, okay? And we find information, documentation, evidence that this was occurring as early as the 5th century BC. And by the 3rd century, we actually have documented cases, documented evidence that shows that there were dissections being carried out on human bodies. You know, we as humans, we are very inquisitive individuals. We like to know what things are made of. We like to take things apart, that kind of stuff. So it makes sense that we would do the same thing to our bodies, trying to figure out what makes them up, okay, how they work, and that kind of stuff. Probably the height of anatomy comes back in the Victorian times when we actually constructed anatomical theaters in certain cities, big cities, so that people could come in and they could look, they could observe. Common people could come in and observe a dissection of the human body, okay? And we see lots of paintings at this time. I'll show you some of those coming up. But there became an issue in the mid-1700s, okay? We had lots of medical schools, and there were certain laws about who could be a cadaver once they died. So they actually changed the laws a little bit to make it much easier to be hung for a crime, so that would allow for more cadavers to be available for our medical students. Okay, this happened back in England. They even had people that were designed, they made their living being body snatchers. They would bury a corpse and it would be dug up almost immediately. They actually had to post watch in the cemeteries, especially around the new graves that had recently been dug. And there are cases that were shown to be anatomical murder. They were killed just so they could get the cadaver. So it's a rich history we have about trying to learn about our anatomy. Here's some of those paintings that I talked to you about, some of the major artists of the time, Da Vinci, Rembrandt, things like that, showing us the different parts of our anatomy, about dissections and things like this. And again, the Victorian era was a big melting pot of knowledge and growth with our anatomy. Okay, so the anatomy basically is telling us what the structures are, identifying the structures, giving a name to the structure, and we'll talk about that coming up. The physiology of it is how it works. So we again, as the anatomy was being learned, so too was the physiology. So we have dates back from the 5th century again with Hippocrates, also people in China and India doing the same kinds of things with physiology. But we see Hippocrates really coming forth with an idea that the fluids in the body that are called the humors, okay, were reflective of the four basic substances on earth, that being earth, water, air, and fire, okay? And in our bodies, those four substances, okay, had a corresponding fluid or humor: black bile, phlegm, blood, and yellow bile, okay? So these represented what was going on in the body with these fluids. And there was a note that Hippocrates also said there's an emotional connection here. So now we start seeing that as humans, we have a connection with our emotions to what's going on with these fluids. And then much later, physiologist named Galenus gave us some experiments that probe the functions of the body. Okay, now he kind of built on what Hippocrates has said those many, many years ago. Okay, tried to tie these humors back to our body, temperaments, our emotions again. Okay, so the different ways that we feel. Okay, like melancholy was tied back to black bile. Okay, sanguine was reflective of the blood, that kind of thing. And Galen also identified that there was these three connecting systems. So this is the first time we start seeing actual systems being involved, where we have a nervous system that included the brain and the nerves, that we have the heart and the arteries as a system, and then he had the liver and the veins as another system, and we'll explain how these are tied as well. But he started doing experimental physiology, okay? And this greatly influenced medicine. And his work kind of carried forth for about the next 1400 years, okay? Even though it wasn't right, okay, it carried forth for a long period of time. And that gave us the basis of what we're going to be dealing with anatomy and physiology. And one of the cool things is you think about anatomy and physiology being, we know quite a bit about it, right? We know everything there is to know about the human body, and that's not right at all. We are learning things about what's going on in our bodies, probably weekly. Okay, new things come alive. Okay, come to sight. It's amazing. We even, as an organ system, there have been people talk of multiple organ systems that we need to add to the ones that we currently have. And I'll talk to you about that as we kind of go through things. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit of the history of anatomy and physiology. Like I said, it dates way back, and we got it wrong a lot, and we'll talk about getting it wrong as we kind of go through this course. Okay. All right. Now we're going to use scientific terminology when we talk about anatomy and physiology. Okay. Science has its own language, and we're going to learn a lot of terms in this course. So when we think about this, remember that the educated people back in those days when we were talking about Hippocrates and Galen and those kind of things, they spoke Latin. Okay, and Latin is a dead language. We don't see new words coming to play like twerking or something like that. Okay, all the words are established for us, so we get to use those specific words to describe, and that's the key when we think about science. We want those terms to be descriptive of things. So the cool thing is when you learn some of these Latin roots, these suffixes and prefixes, it tells you exactly what it means. Okay? For instance, we have a bone that is down in your lower leg. Okay? It's called the tibia. Well, there is a muscle that sticks out in front of the tibia. Its name, tibialis anterior, meaning it is in front of the tibia. It's the muscle that's in front of the tibia. Okay? We've got terms like hemolytic, hemo for blood, lytic means to break, to lysine. Okay? We've got names of muscles like biceps brachii. Okay? Biceps refers to having two heads. Okay? And brachii means the upper arm. So the two-headed muscle that's in the upper arm versus the three-headed muscle, the triceps brachii, that's in the upper arm. Okay? And one of the things that we try to get away from is naming things after people. Okay? Because a lot of these things, if you don't know who the person was, they make no sense to you. A good example of that is the baseball pitcher, Tommy John. He had a revolutionary surgery for his elbow. And from then on, this surgery was called Tommy John surgery. You still hear it in football, you hear it in baseball, but people that don't know the sport, they have no idea what we're doing. Okay? They have no idea what this is. Okay? Hansen's disease. Hansen's disease is also known as leprosy, and you can see the picture here of the young lady that is being afflicted by leprosy. Okay? Leprosy makes a whole lot more sense than it being called Hansen's disease. So as we're going through this course, I'm going to try to give you both names a lot of the time, but really I want it to be much more about this meaningful name, not this commemorative name. Okay? We're really trying to get away from these commemorative names, but some of those are the ones that we know of. Okay? So when we look at life, okay, we're dealing with the human body and how it allows for life to be arranged. Okay, so with this life, we've got some certain characteristics of life that list on the left-hand side with metabolism, responsiveness, movement, development, growth, and reproduction. All are characteristics of life. And we're going to talk about each one of these as we go through it. And right now, the garbage truck is going to empty some garbage. You pick up a garbage can and dump it. Make a lot of noise. Hang on. Okay, now they're gone. So these 6 characteristics of life are things that we are going to delve into in this class. We've got a whole chapter on metabolism. We talk about the nervous system. The nervous system reflects the responsiveness of the body. If this happens, we do this. Okay, muscles, movement. Now, not only moving the body, but movement inside the body, like the blood, the lymph, okay, the urinary system, things like that. Development, as we go through the changes that occur as we age, okay, and then growth and reproduction, okay. We're going to see that cells change, okay, as they go through their life cycle. They're going to change. That relates to the growth. We see changes as we grow. We see different needs for metabolism, for nutrients as we're going through these growth phases. And lastly, once we have reached maturity, we have the ability to reproduce. Okay? And that is a lot of metabolism involved in this to have enough energy for us to go through the reproductive process. Okay? So those are some of the things when we think about life, okay, that we're going to deal with. And there are organ systems that are specific to these characteristics of life. On the right-hand column that you can see, okay, these are the things that we're going to need in order for life to occur. We have to get oxygen, okay? And I ask this question, okay, a lot. Why do we need oxygen? Okay, and students will say something like, well, we need it to breathe. Well, right, but why do we breathe in oxygen? Okay, what does oxygen do for us in the body? What's its role in the body? And you have to get all the way down inside of a cell to where there's an organelle called a mitochondria for oxygen to be utilized. Okay, So there are all kinds of life forms that don't require oxygen, but we require oxygen. And the reason we require oxygen is to produce ATP, the energy of the body. Okay. So that second thing, the nutrients, we have to get enough food into our bodies to maintain life. By taking in the nutrients, we can utilize oxygen in the mitochondria and produce energy that we can utilize. Okay. There's also a narrow range of temperatures that we exist in. Okay. If you get us too cold, we don't do well. If you get us too warm, we don't do well. That's the same with atmospheric pressure. There are specific pressures that we exist in. Okay, so we got to fit into these categories where there's enough oxygen available for us. Okay, we've got enough nutrients, the temperature is correct, and the atmospheric pressure is correct in order for us to survive. Okay, when we look at the arrangement of things, you can see the human male over here on the right hand side, and it is composed of, it says 11 different organ systems. That really depends on the book that you're looking at, and those organ systems are composed of different organs, and those organs are made up of tissues, and there's different kinds of cells that make up the different kinds of tissues. Okay, inside the cell, we've got different organelles that are doing a particular function. Inside of that, there are macromolecules and molecules inside of our cell, all the way down to a specific atom. Okay, and this is how we're going to study anatomy and physiology. Okay, we've got to be able to know at the atomic level, what does chloride do in our bodies? What does iron do in our bodies? What does calcium do in our bodies? So we're going to talk about specific atoms and how they are important to our ability to persist as humans. We're going to put these atoms together in molecules. We're going to make organelles out of these. We're going to combine the organelles into different types of cells that have a particular function, and these cells form different tissue types, and these tissue types have different functions. The different tissues come together and make up the organs that have different functions. The different organs come together and form the organ systems, and ultimately we get the organism. Okay, the organism, all these organ systems working together to allow the organism to survive. The term at the end of that organism is homeostasis. Okay, working in homeostasis, meaning we are within a set boundary. Everything is good. We're where we're supposed to be. Okay, we'll talk about that term a lot. Okay, so when we look at muscles, like if we look at the heart, that's coming in A&P2, we know the heart as an organ is part of the cardiovascular system. Okay, and it is made up of cardiac muscle tissues among some other tissue types as well. And then within that muscle tissue, the muscle cells, the cardiac muscle cells, okay, are specific in their function to make the heart go through its contraction and relaxation process. There are protein filaments inside of this that allow the heart cells to contract, and we need specific molecules there to make this all work. Okay, it's going to take actin and myosin as far as these filaments, along with other receptor proteins, to make the cardiac muscle tissue work. So we got to look at it at a lot of different levels. Okay, so we got to know a lot. Okay, so there is a YouTube video you can watch here that talks about the different organ systems. I say there's 10, 11, or 12, and it really depends on what book you look at and how they combine them together. Okay, as far as 12 goes, we're looking for the mesenteries, the body's connective tissue on the inside of it, to become the 12th organ system. Waiting for it to hit the books. That's something new that has just been out, recently discussed as a 12th organ system for the body. Okay, so when we're looking at this, we're looking at these organ systems working together. And to complicate things, we're going to have organs that are going to work in more than one system. So they're not specific to an organ system a lot of the times. Okay, they they reach across, okay, the rows and do other things. Okay, so the liver is a really good example of this. We're going to see the liver in lots of different organ systems and how it plays a little bit of a role in each one of these. Okay, I said that term homeostasis. All the body systems working together in a stable internal environment. Okay, so we're going to look at many things. A good example of this is when we go to the doctor's office. We go to the doctor's office, one of the things they want me to do when I get there is they want me to get on the scale, and they're going to compare my weight to what it was before, see if there's any change, right? Am I stable with this or not? Okay. They might check my height, okay, see if I've grown or I've shrunk any. They're going to stick a thermometer in my mouth right there while I'm on the scale, and they're going to get my temperature. Okay. Hopefully it's around 98.6 degrees. Okay, that would mean I'm in homeostasis with my temperature. What if it's low? What if it's high? Well, then I'm not where I should be. I go into that room, they stick a blood pressure cuff on my arm, and they check my blood pressure to see if I'm in homeostasis with respect to my blood pressure. Okay, are my arteries and veins in my heart working together to achieve this normal range, okay, of blood pressure? And after taking all of these, now they're going to ask me, well, what's wrong? How do you feel like you're out of homeostasis? Okay, so we're going to see lots of trying to stay in a particular specific range. Okay, and I'll give you these ranges, and a lot of these, like 98.6, you probably already know. Maybe 120 over 80 for blood pressure as far as millimeters of mercury. So we know some of these, but we're going to talk about, well, what's the normal amount of glucose that we should see in the bloodstream? What's the pH of the bloodstream? Things like that. Okay. If we do it wrong, okay, if there's failure to function within a normal range, we say that is a diseased state. Okay, that is a diseased state. So lots of different organ systems have to be in a particular range, that normal range, and some of these organs are going to cross over, like we said. Make sure that they are helping the other organ systems to maintain this specific range. Okay, and we could talk about a lot of different ranges, like I said. Okay, when we're trying to regulate these, we can regulate them at the exact level they're being operated at. We call this auto-regulation or intrinsic regulation. It's when we have an automatic response in the cell, tissue, or organ that is actually being affected. Okay, so if the heart's got something going on with it, and the heart is dealing with that and trying to maintain this specific response, we call that intrinsic regulation. But if it's something coming from the nervous system or the endocrine system, that's like Big Brother watching what's going on down in the body. We call that extrinsic regulation. Okay? So we'll talk about the nervous system's ability to maintain hormone levels for one thing. Okay? So intrinsic regulation at the location where things are happening. Extrinsic regulation farther away, dealing with the nervous system and the endocrine system. Okay, and again, we're just getting started with this, so these I will keep bringing these up as we go through the class. Okay, so when we're trying to maintain our normal limits, trying to stay in homeostasis, there is a specific set of things that we're going to need in order for this to occur. Okay, we're going to need something. Okay, let's say we're trying to maintain body temperature. I've got to have something in me that will identify what my body temperature is. Okay, that's called a receptor. It's going to receive the stimulus. Okay, then if there is this receptor, I need a control center that will process this information and say, okay, it's either too high or too low, or you're okay. Okay, and then if I'm too high or too low, I need an effector that I can change. I can send information to it and say, you need to carry out these instructions in order for us to get back to our normal body temperature. Okay, so over here on the diagram that you can see on the left-hand side, okay, if we're in homeostasis here, that's the normal body temperature, okay, or the temperature of the room, let's say. Okay, If we change that, we need to be, let's say the temperature goes down, the receptor picks up, okay, that the temperature has dropped. It sends this information to our thermostat. This is the control center. For us, it'd be the brain. And it says, hey, the temperature has dropped. The control center says, gotcha, temperature's going down. I need to talk to the heater, okay? And the heater comes on, and the heater increases the temperature in the room, and we return back to normal homeostasis. Okay, same thing if the temperature goes up. If the temperature gets too hot, we send information to the receptor. The receptor says, oh, it's warm now. Send that to the control center. Control says, gotcha, temperature's going up, need to turn on the air conditioner. Talk to the air conditioner comes on, cools the room, and now we're back in homeostasis. And once the room is back in homeostasis, we shut this all down. Okay, we stop, okay, cooling the room off. We call this negative feedback. We are negating the stimulus. If the stimulus says we're getting too warm, we want to cool it off. If the stimulus says we're getting too cool, we want to heat it up. That's what's called negative feedback. And the goal is to keep it within the normal range. Okay, we see that here. As the temperature gets too low, turn on the heater. Temperature goes up. If it gets too high, turn on the air conditioner. If it gets too low, turn on the heater. If it gets too high, turn on the air conditioner. We're maintaining this range, okay? This range around 22 degrees, okay? Now, there's a different one. If there's negative feedback, there's positive feedback. And positive feedback is a very rare situation. It is one that we will talk about when we do blood clotting. The goal is to reinforce the stimulus. If we want to clot the blood, we need to clot the blood. Keep clotting the blood. Clot it, clot it, clot it. Make sure we don't lose any blood. And then we'll stop it. Same thing with a baby being born. Every time that contraction happens, it causes the next contraction to come faster and harder. Okay? And these contractions keep occurring to get the baby pushed out as long as the baby's in there. Once the baby's out, contractions are going to stop. So that's called positive feedback. Okay. Like I said, lots of things working together. Look at all these different organ systems, integumentary, muscles, cardiovascular, nervous, all working together to maintain our body temperature. Okay. Body fluid composition. How much fluid do you have? Digestive system, cardiovascular system, urinary system, respiratory system, lots of different things maintaining the blood composition. Okay, the volume of blood, the waste. I don't expect you to know these, y'all. It's just me explaining. Okay, we've got a lot of things to learn, and these things are going to be hooked together. So we got to understand how they're hooked together. Okay, so we'll hit all these as we move through. When we are learning anatomy, we always have the patient or the person that we are learning from, the model, whatever it is, they are in anatomical position. Okay? An anatomical position is as you see here on the screen. Okay? Notice that the person is standing upright and their palms are facing forward. Okay, palms forward. That's very important. And that sets up what is anterior versus what is posterior. Okay, we're looking at the anterior view of the person, okay, that is facing us. The person with their back to us, that is their posterior view. Okay, and that sets up what is anterior versus what is posterior on the body itself. So if I say the anterior part of the hand, that's going to be the palm side of the hand. If I say the posterior part of the hand, that is the back of the hand. Okay, so it carries through on every part of the body. Okay, so this is anatomical position. So when we're learning our bones and our muscles, we're going to make sure that we learn them in this arrangement. Okay, we've got a lot of anatomical landmarks to learn as well. Okay, we use these terms to identify a particular location on the body. Okay, we don't say arm because that's a very large structure. We can say the upper arm, the brachium, versus the antebrachium, which is the forearm, versus the antecubitus, which is the elbow. Okay, so you see here on our picture, and I took this from the textbook that we have, the online textbook. It has all of these identified: frons, cranium, facies, oris, mentis, axilla, brachium, antecubitus, antebrachium, carpus, pollex, palma, digits or phalanges, patella, crus, tarsus, digits again or phalanges. We have oculus, bucca, oris, nasus, cervicus, cervicus, thoracis or thorax, mamma, abdomen, umbilicus, hip, okay, also known as coaxial, pelvis, inguine, pubis, femur, and then the foot, we say the pes or the foot, okay? On the posterior part, we see cephalon being the whole head, cervicus being that neck region, shoulder, okay? We also hear acromial if it's on the front portion. Dorsum is the back, brachium, olecranon, lumbus, sacral, antebrachium, manus, the hand, gluteus, femur, popliteal, this one, popliteus, sura, calcaneus, planta, okay? And those are the ones that I need you to learn, okay? I need you to learn those. And the easiest way to do this is to set them up with flashcards, okay? Set them up with flashcards, okay? What is the mouth? It's oris. What is the forearm? It's antebrachium, okay? And we're going to use these terms over and over and over again, okay? So you don't have to know them now. You just got to get them down before our first test, okay? All right. I'm going to use directional terminology when I talk to you about what's going on in lab and in lecture, okay? So when we look at it, okay, here is the body, and we've got going, first of all, we have a lateral view of the body over here, and we have a frontal view of the body over here, okay? So lateral means to go to the side, so this is the side. Frontal is we're looking head on at the person from the front, okay? And one thing I didn't mention earlier when I talked about anatomical position is the patient owns these structures, okay? So we're talking about the patient's hand. It belongs to the patient. So it is the right or the left of our patient. It's not our right or left. It's the patient's right or left because they own that structure, okay? So notice that we've got the right side of the body over here, and we've got the left side of the body over here, okay? If I want to go, if there is a structure, let's say, that is here, I can say, since this is the knee, okay, that it's going this direction, okay? That term is distal, okay? It's distal to the knee. It's going away, okay? It's going toward the body this way. Let's say it was here. I can say it's proximal to the knee, okay? Distal to the hip, okay? If it's going this direction, we say that is medial. If it's going this direction, that's lateral, okay? Again, distal this way, proximal this way. That only works on your arms and your legs for proximal and distal, okay? We see anterior and posterior over here on this side. This whole front side is anterior or ventral. The back is posterior or dorsal. And if we are on the torso here, We can say if we're going this way, we're going cranially. If we're going this way, we're going caudally, which means your tail. Okay? So those are a lot of those major terms that we're going to see used in this course. The other one is superior and inferior. Get rid of all of these. Okay? And superior and inferior work throughout the entire body as it's above it for superior, it's below it, it's inferior. Okay? All right. Planes, we're going to look at the body cut into different planes or sections, and this sets up how we cut the body. If I cut the body across like this, where there is an upper and a lower, we call that a transverse or a cross-sectional plane. If I cut it down the center, okay, that separates it from a right and a left, we call that a sagittal plane. Now there is a mid-sagittal that is the perfect one that cuts us into a perfect mirror image on both sides. You only get one mid-sagittal plane on something. And then all the other ones are known as parasagittals, okay? But we can just use the term sagittal, okay? Then if we cut it this way, okay, so that there is a front and a back or an anterior and a posterior, we call that a coronal plane. Okay, so think about a tiara on the head here. Okay, it divides the head across this way. Okay, and that could be any way you look at this coronal plane, where there is a front and a back to it. Okay. We've got some body cavities that we're going to find these organs in. The dorsal body cavity is composed of the cranial cavity where the brain sits and the vertebral cavity where the spinal cord sits. Okay? The ventral body cavity, okay? The ventral body cavity is composed of the thoracic cavity where we have the lungs. Okay, we also have a pericardial cavity that is where the heart sits. Okay, we have a superior mediastinum, we'll talk about it. We talk about the thymus and things like that. Okay, we have an abdominal cavity, and that thoracic cavity is separated from the abdominal cavity by the diaphragm. It cuts across right like this. And then we have the pelvic cavity, okay, where we find some of the reproductive organs and things like this. And we'll talk about what's found where as we're going through the class. Okay, we'll divide the body into regions and quadrants. Okay, this abdominal pelvic region, so below the diaphragm, we can divide it into 9 regions that would be called, the central one would be called the umbilical region. That's where your belly button is. Below that region is the hypogastric region. Above it is the epigastric. Epi means above, hypo means below. So like epidermis versus hypodermis. Epidermis means above the dermis. Hypodermis means below the dermis. Okay, we got the right hypochondriac region. We've got the left hypochondriac region. Okay, chondro for cartilage. Lots of cartilage here that attaches to the sternum and the ribs. Okay, and then we have the iliac regions at the bottom. Right, again, it's our patient's right, it's our patient's left. Iliac regions, and that is the ilia of the pelvis here. And the lumbar region, right and left lumbar. So those are the 9, and we need to know those if we're going to know that the appendix is found over here in the right iliac region. Okay, or the liver extends from the epigastric region all the way over to the right hypochondriac region, with just a touch of it making its way into the left hypochondriac region. Okay, now you can do it 9. Some doctors' offices use this 9 abdominal pelvic region system. Others use this 4 abdominal pelvic quadrant system. So just make it a 4 right where the belly button is, being right here. Make it across like this. You got an right upper quadrant, a left upper quadrant, a right lower quadrant, and a left lower quadrant. Yep. So that appendix is going to be over here. So it would be found in the right lower quadrant. Okay. Spleen is going to be much more over here on the left upper quadrant. Things like that. Okay. And then here's a list of those terms to know for this first chapter. Okay. And y'all can read them, so I'll let you do that. And again, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Be glad to talk to you about it. And we're going to pick up our next chapter is going to be the chemistry of life. We'll start with the smallest things, those atoms and molecules, and work our way up. Okay? Okay. See you there.